Hello, welcome back. It is Audrey from Audrey Approved. Thanks for stopping by. Today is going to be a wrap up for the Read the World reading project. I have not given an update on this project in over a year. I think my last video was in January 2024. So I am well overdue for a few wrap ups actually, because the project has not stopped. I worked on it all of last year, and so I'm going to be giving an update today for countries ranging between Cyprus and Ethiopia. As a reminder, I am working on this with my aunt and my cousin, so it is another, I guess, family reading project, family book club, that I joined a little bit later than when they started it, but I started around fall time in 2021. So it's been about 3.5 years, and as of today, I think I'm at about 100 countries, so about halfway through. So if the pace keeps up, then that's around 20 to 30 books per year, and it'll take us around, I don't know, 7 years to do. So doesn't matter how quickly we do it, but we are doing it in roughly alphabetical order. So we choose chunks of countries at a time, and then we finish those or most of them, and then we move on to the next chunk of countries. So I am reflecting that kind of strategy in approaching this reading project with my wrap-up videos. And so I'm going to link down below the playlist where I have my 3 other wrap-up videos, where again I'm working in chunks of countries as we move alphabetically through the alphabet. In the down bar, I'm also going to put all of the countries and all of the books that we read between Cyprus and Ethiopia. Before these wrap-up videos, I don't want to talk about every single book that we read, and so I tend to focus on, just the books that stood out to me, whether it be because they were unique, because I didn't like them, because I thought they would be really good if you're doing a similar kind of reading project. And so those are the books I'm going to talk about today, but again, everything that we've read between this chunk of countries is listed down below. I'll also drop 2 extra links. One will be a resource if you're like just starting out. So my cousin has published this kind of public version of the spreadsheet that we use, which lists all of the countries and then lists a whole bunch of options for each of the countries. So again, if you're searching around for books for a specific country, you can check out that public list. And then I will also include her Instagram, because I think she's got a great Bookstagram page. If you're looking to read very diversely, then I would recommend checking out my cousin Amy. I think that's all the background and reminders I need to give, so I will jump right in. So the first book that I want to talk about today is Songbirds by Christy Lefteri, which was the Cyprian pick. Now, Songbirds is a very quiet piece of historical fiction. You might read the book blurb and say, oh, this is a mystery, maybe it's got a little bit more action in it, and it's not. It's very slow and meditative, and it follows the disappearance of a Sri Lankan nanny who works for a Cyprian mother. And so we follow the perspectives of this woman, this mother, who is looking for the Sri Lankan nanny, as well as her neighbor who has some sort of relationship with this woman that has disappeared. I believe that this is based off of real events, and so it has a lot of commentary as to migrant experiences and what these women have gone through. And I would say that, I've talked about this before in wrap-ups, I know I have, that a huge theme in some of these books is violence against women. 2 major themes: violence against women, civil war. And I think that, this one solely falls into that former category. I ended up liking this way more than I thought I would. I don't know. I just thought that I wouldn't enjoy it as much for some reason, but it has really sat well and marinated in my brain ever since I finished it, which was actually probably a long time ago now that I'm sitting here and thinking about it. But yeah, I enjoyed this one. I thought it was good. I would pick up something else from this author again in the future. SPACEMAN of Bohemia by Jaroslav Kalfar is the Czechia pick, or the Czech Republic. And this is like a fever dream of a book. Its premise is that it follows a spaceman or an astronaut as he goes into space to collect some sort of cosmic dust. And for a book set partly in space, I think you'd say, hey, Audrey, that's probably not going to teach you a lot about the Czech Republic. But it does, because there's a lot of flashbacks, there's a lot of background history, there's a lot of reflection as we follow not only what the astronaut is going through in kind of present day, but also his experiences growing up in the countryside, his experiences being the son of a Communist Party, I think, torturer, if I remember correctly, and all the conflicts that ensue because of that, living in the village that he grew up in. I would call this equal parts like sci-fi adventure, love story, kind of philosophical, meandering, and history of the Czech Republic. And so I actually do think it is quite a good pick if you're trying to read diversely and read more and learn more about the Czech Republic. One thing that stood out to me in this book is that I absolutely never knew where it was going to go. I never knew what was going to happen next, and it's a very random and chaotic storyline. There's also some very memorable characters. This is not a spoiler, it's in the book blurb, but there's a giant space spider. You never know if he's real or not, if our main character is imagining him or not, who I thought was, again, a very memorable character. I ended up just really enjoying this. I liked that I never knew where it was going to go. It is a fever dream, like I said, and it's not going to work for everybody. It's definitely not going to work for everybody. But I found it super memorable, and for that I'm really glad we read Spaceman of Bohemia. For Denmark, we read The Little Book of HYGGE, The Danish Way to Live Well by Meik Wiking. I think I'm saying HYGGE right. So I'm gonna go with, I looked it up, I think I'm remembering correctly. I thought this book was pointless. I'm sorry. HYGGE is, I wrote down the definition actually. A quality of coziness and comfortable conviviality that engenders a feeling of contentment or well-being. I don't know, maybe the analogous word in English should be like coziness or something like that. And the author is a director of an institute. It's called the Happiness Institute, and he sets out in this book to kind of tell us why he thinks Danes are some of the happiest people in the world. Now, what I think the author was trying to say in this book is that Danes are happy because they value experiences over things, they value spending time at home, they value spending time with family and friends, and that's kind of like cool. But in practice, the chapters range from things like you should use warm lighting rather than cool lighting in your house. You should knit socks in the winter because it's really cozy. You should make stews because they're hearty. You should buy furniture made of wood rather than furniture made of other materials because wood feels more homey. It's like, I don't know, like it just felt so fluffy and surface and, dare I say, stupid to have chapters that told me what color of lighting I should pick to put myself in a better mood. I don't know. I think if the book was something like How to Be Cozy, then I would have better expectations, but the author started this book trying to explain to us why Danes are happier than other people. What about the society has created a foundation for people to have the bandwidth and ability to value things like experiences over consumerism? Although I do feel that the book was kind of consumeristic in telling us to buy certain things for our house. I don't know. You can tell from how I'm talking, I know I'm more animated now, that I really didn't like this book because I thought it was just a waste. And then the book itself has a whole bunch of illustrations, but they're like, I don't know, they were like Hallmark card illustrations. I don't know, I'm sorry. Really didn't like this one. So this one was a pass for me. I would not recommend it if you're trying to pick a book from Denmark. Another book that did not work for me but didn't make me as annoyed, I just feel like it entirely went over my head, is In the United States of Africa by Abdourahman Waberi, which was the Djibouti pick. And the premise of this book is that it's a role reversal of political power in the 21st century. So the United States is a third world country, and we have a whole bunch of migrants that are trying to move to the United States of Africa, which is a global superpower. Now this synopsis sounds really good, but in practice, I just didn't really enjoy the execution of it. It's not a novel. It's very short. I don't know, 100, 150 pages. And it's set up as a series of essays. And so there's no like main character, there's no character arc, there's no big huge plot line, there's no, I don't know, relationships that are developed. It's just, there are characters in some of these essays, but they switch around and they're different. And they cover different facets of this United States of Africa. But I found it, impenetrable might be the word for me to describe my reading experience of this. Esoteric. It just went over my head. I felt my eyes glaze over when I read it. And so out of almost all of the books that we've read, and I, in practice, have read about half the books now. You know, I'm reviewing up through Ethiopia, but in practice, I'm reading way later in the alphabet. This might be the most confusing of the books that I have read so far. So if you have read this and feel like you got something from it, then I'd love to discuss with you about it in the comments. For Egypt, I was originally going to read a piece of like nonfiction history about, the Egyptian dynasties, but I decided to instead read If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Nornaga, which if you're on like Bookstagram, or I guess BookTube as well, it has recently made the rounds, or maybe in the last year or two, made the rounds. It's a pretty well-read book, I think, within the community. And for some reason, I thought this was a romance, like a traditional romance. Maybe it's the cover, I'm not quite sure. And that's not true. It is maybe it's a story of a toxic romantic relationship, but it follows two main characters. One is an Egyptian, I think, photojournalist who grew up in Egypt, and his relationship with an Egyptian American woman that he meets. And she is coming back to Egypt for, I think, the first time to visit her parents' homeland. Now, I think this book is notable because of the female main character. I think that her thoughts and her character development were really interesting, and a major topic of this book is identity politics. So how does she view herself? How does she think others view herself in terms of her physical appearance, her sexuality, her political presence? I don't know. It felt very self-aware, and I really enjoyed that aspect of this book. There is a really interesting use of literary form in the book that comes into play. And if you've read the book, then you know what I'm talking about. I like that, but it wasn't my favorite part of the book. I think my favorite part was, again, the exploration of identity of that main female character. And so, yeah, I was glad I read this. I didn't love it per se, but I thought it was really entertaining. I think it would make a really good book club book. So if you're looking for, like, literary contemporary pieces that will engender a lot of discussion, then I think this is a really solid pick and one to pick up. In these videos, I always like to highlight what my favorite book from the chunk of books I'm talking about is. And so that favorites asterisk is actually going to get split this time. So this is one of my two favorites for the section. And that is the El Salvador pick, which was Solito by Javier Zamora. Now this has extremely high ratings on Goodreads, like a 4.5, 4.45, something like that, which is very high for the platform. And it has been well reviewed online as well, and I think for very good reason. This is, I think, just as good as people say it is. And I avoided reading it for a really long time. And that's because I don't love memoirs, or I think just any stories from the point of view of young children. I find that it usually feels forced. I don't like being in the head of like a really young kid. I don't know. It's just not something that I enjoy, and I knew that the author wrote this from that kind of perspective. So the author was 9 when he left El Salvador, and he crossed into the United States through or across the Mexican border with the help of, a paying, I guess, coyote that helped lead him across. He did this without his parents. Now this book put me in my place in terms of perspectives from young children, because I think the author absolutely nailed the narrative voice in this memoir. You can tell that, the author, again, writing from himself as a child, you cover things that 9-year-olds would worry about, but adults would not. But it didn't distract me. It felt, again, very immersive and real. I think that if you are trying to learn more about political, economic, and historical context when it comes to Central American migrants, if you're looking for a lot of personal reflection, this is probably not the book for you. Because I would say Solito tells the reader exactly what the author went through, but not with a lot of analysis. But if you want to know, this is what he did, this is what he experienced, this is what he went through, and lays that out for you in a really kind of gripping and harrowing and emotional kind of read, then this is a really good read. It is someone's real life experiences. The one thing I will say about Solito is that there is a fair bit of Spanish mixed into the writing. So for me, I found it a lot easier to read this, so ebook or physical book, so you can look up words and get kind of better context. For me, I tried it in audio because I usually always love my audiobooks, or my nonfiction as audiobooks, and it really didn't work for me. I had to restart in print format. But yeah, Solito is an excellent read. I was really glad we picked it. I was avoiding it, so again, I have to finish all the books from this chunk before I can do these wrap-up videos, and I delayed in reading Solito for like over a year, maybe a year and a half, because I really didn't think that I was gonna like it because of the young child perspective, and I was very happy to be proven wrong. For Eritrea, we picked My Father's Daughter by Hannah Poole. And Hannah Poole is an Eritrean British journalist who was adopted at a very young age by a British couple. And this memoir follows her experiences going back to Eritrea, I think for the first time, I'm pretty sure for the first time, as an adult, as like 29 or 30-year-old adult, to go meet her birth father and her birth family. I think what stood out to me in this one is not so much the background on Eritrea or the contemporary history on Eritrea, of which there is a fair amount, but really on the author's experiences being adopted and how that changes how you view yourself and your place. The author was really raw and open with how she felt. And if anything, I would say maybe someone might critique this to say she spent too much time in her own head. And so the pacing ends up being really slow because the author talks about everything she was thinking during certain moments. But I don't know, again, I feel like I learned more about what it's like to be adopted from this book than I did about Eritrea, but I was glad to have read it. It's not something that I would have ever picked up if I hadn't been doing a project like this, and I did learn a lot from it. And then the last book that I want to talk about today is the other book that I think I would call my favorite of the chunk of books that I'm talking about today. And that is the book from Estonia, which is The Man Who Spoke Snakish by Andris Kivarak and translated by Christopher Mosley. Now this is a super unique read. I think I would call it a cross between a traditional like folk tale or fairy tale combined with maybe like Monty Python, because Monty Python is like vulgar and it can be kind of violent and kind of sexist, and so can this book. Then there were aspects of it that did again remind me of kind of a traditional tale. The premise is that we follow a boy named Lemmet who is growing up in the wild forests of Estonia. And him and his family and his very small community speak a language called Snakish, which allows them to converse with all of the forest animals, including snakes, which are some of his friends. And so this kind of juxtaposes against all the people living in the village, eating this horrible thing called bread, praying to this like random guy on a stick, I think is how he calls Jesus. And Lemmet is both fascinated and disgusted by village life. Now the plot is just all over the place with this one. You never knew where it was going to go, and it just slowly unfolded and unfolded and unfolded in a way that continuously surprised me. And that aspect of the reading experience I do find really fun. I think Lemmet as a character is an endearing pagan. He's kind of horrible and violent and cruel, and yet you're still kind of rooting for him. I almost felt bad that I was rooting for him, but I found him, again, extremely memorable. So yeah, this book, again, nothing I would ever come across, and nothing like I have ever read before, I think. And so for that reason alone, I would recommend it, and I think I was just really glad to have picked it up as part of this reading project. That wraps up my kind of reading experiences from Cyprus down to Ethiopia. But again, if you're interested in any of the books that I didn't talk about within that chunk of countries, you can check the down bar down below. I will be back actually very soon because all the books are finished for the next chunk, which I think will be countries that start with F and G. But until then, I hope you guys are doing well, and I will see you next time. Happy reading.